How did God fit all the animals in the ark? Have you ever heard this question before? Or maybe you've wondered about this yourself. Many people think about this question and they decide it's impossible. And since it's impossible, they decide they cannot believe the Bible because it tells us stories that are too unbelievable and impossible to have happened the way the Bible says it happened. But let's just stop and think about that reasoning. First of all, let's realize that the God of the Bible is a powerful God who was not created. So he's not subject to all the same rules as created things. He is the God who spoke things into existence with his word alone. The God who formed man out of the dirt. The God who parted the Red Sea for his people to walk through and closed it to destroy completely their enemy. The God who came as a baby in a manger, who healed the sick and raised the dead. The God who walked on the water, who rose from the dead, and who walked through walls in his resurrected physical form. We do have a God who does things that are impossible from our perspective all the time. So yes, we do believe in miracles, but an evolutionist who believes things just popped into existence all by themselves is also someone who believes in impossibilities. And in my opinion, they believe in bigger impossibilities than I do because I believe in a powerful God who created and continues to work miracles in and through his creation. Whereas they believe that things created themselves from nothing and those things just keep getting better all by themselves. So yes, the ark presents a miracle. But the miracle is that God saved mankind and all living things through the flood. Fitting the animals on the ark isn't nearly as hard as one would think it would be when we begin to understand some basics in genetics. Let's dive into genetics and the Bible to figure out how two of every kind of animal could fit on the ark. First of all, what is a kind of animal? What does God mean by kind? I have a giraffe and an elephant, different kinds of animals, right? A hippo, and a rhinoceros, and even my zebra. All different kinds. But what does God really mean when he says kind, and what does he say about the kinds of animals that he created? The God of the Bible, the creator of all, says, I created everything according to their own kind. So let's look at that. In Genesis 1:11 and 12, it says, Then God said, Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after their kind, with seed in them. And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God said that it was good. And then in Genesis 1:21 we see God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:24 says, Then God said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. So then that's at the beginning of creation when God creates everything after their kind. And then we have the flood that happens. And that's what we're looking at, is that ark and that idea of Noah taking all the animals on the ark. And in Genesis 6:20 it says, Of the birds after their kind, and of the animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the ground after its kind, two of every kind will come to you. Genesis 7:14 says, They and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, all sorts of birds. So God says after their kind, after their kind. He keeps saying they're going to come to you in kinds. I'm going to have these animals come to you, two of every kind, and you're going to keep them alive in the ark. And as we have been studying genetics, we have learned that traits are passed down from parents to offspring. As this happens, diversity increases. We already know that there are many breeds of animals that exist now that didn't exist in the days of Noah and the flood. For instance, poodles were not a breed that existed back then, but rather poodles are a breed of dogs that man has through breeding brought into existence. But this breed of dogs came from just that, dogs. Dogs begat dogs, and cats begat cats, and hippos begat hippos, and so on. In science, we classify animals using the taxonomic classification: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And when we speak of kinds, as the Bible does, we are actually speaking of organisms in the classification area of family. All the genetic information that makes dogs dogs are found in the genes within their DNA molecules, and this information has always been packaged there in the DNA of the original dog created at the beginning of time. It always coded for making a dog, and it always will code for making a dog. It'll never code for making a cat or a mouse or a monkey or a giraffe. So all the animals we will ever get as we choose to breed different dogs together is dogs. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. If we take 3 traits and draw them out on a board, we're going to have 2 parents, and we'll make them look like wolves. And these 2 wolves, we make them look like wolves because, well, the wolf is probably the closest as to what the dog probably looked like that came onto the ark. And those 2 first dogs, or wolves, they'll be the parents. And as we work through this, we're going to draw for you what the offspring would look like from those wolves or those early dogs. You know, some of them would look like their parents, but not all of them would. Some of them would get different genetic traits. And we can see that as we cross it. Let's just play with 3 traits. We're going to play with the traits of, let's say, long hair versus short hair. And we'll say that we have what's called an incomplete dominance. And the idea of an incomplete dominance is when you actually put 2 different traits together, a dominant and a recessive trait, usually you get something that would still have the dominant trait, such as long hair. But in the case of incomplete dominance, we have something in the middle, kind of like when you mix red and white paint, you can get pink. So when we're doing these crosses, we're going to pick 3 different traits for the dog that would possibly give you a middle to look at. So let's say hair length. Let's say that you had long hair, short hair, and in the middle, if you had a dominant and a recessive allele that would show up in your dog, you'd have medium hair. So with that idea, we can say that we can see that we can get 3 different possibilities in hair. We could have long hair, short hair, or medium hair. And we'll play with their snouts too, their noses. We'll say they could have long noses like a collie dog, or short noses like a pug dog, or medium-sized noses like, a terrier. And then we'll say height of leg, long legs or short legs. We'll look at that. So we're just going to look at 3 different traits and see what kind of an effect could we get just looking at 3 different genetic traits. As the dogs came off the ark, we would see a lot of diversity show up in the types of dogs that would start to reproduce as the dogs bred. And as they moved to different places on the earth, you would see different traits come out. Or as man got involved, we would see that he would breed for certain things that he really wanted. Long legs so that the dog would run faster, or short legs so that the dog would be small enough to get in and hunt out animals from holes or something. So some of the babies would look different than the parents. And some will look quite different and will actually have lost information completely. As we saw that some of the alleles have been lost completely from the puppy's genes. But even as we look at these differences, we still are studying dogs. All of these offspring are in fact dogs. That is all we will ever get breeding dog to dog. We'll never get a pig or some other kind of animal. When we look at the offspring of our original dog parents, we will see differences. The puppies are different, not because they have new information in their genes, but because they have a new combination of information that they receive from both parents. We also can see that information was lost from one generation to another generation. We do not see DNA evolving by gaining new information, but rather we see DNA decreasing in variability. Once you get to a purebred poodle, every time you breed a poodle to a poodle, you'll always get a poodle. Could you breed a poodle to a poodle and expect to get back to the wolf? Nope, because remember, little a, little b, little c, bred to little a, little b, little c would only give you little a, little b, little c. You could never get back to big A, little a, big B, little b, big C, little c. It would be impossible because we no longer have the dominant alleles necessary to make that wolf. But if you started again with the wolf, could you eventually get to the poodle again? Yeah, theoretically you could. We will only and always see organisms that remain in the same kinds. Dogs will always be dogs. Birds will always be birds. We will see diversity in the kinds, but we will always see the same kind. Birds may have different sized beaks, but they are still all birds. I think it's interesting how God said it so many times, after their kind, after their kind, after their kind. He wanted to let us know he had intentionally created kinds of animals that would remain those kinds of animals. They would not evolve into other kinds of animals. Noah did not need to bring all the different breeds of dogs in the ark. He just needed 2 of those original dogs, probably dogs similar to a wolf. And this would be the case for the elephants, the hippos, the rhinos, and the giraffes, and the like. There was plenty of time after the floodwaters receded for all the different kinds of animals to produce the diversity of species of animals that we see alive today. So when people question you about how you can believe in a story like the ark because they just can't see how all the animals could fit in the ark, you can share a little genetics with them to help them see that it is very possible. What the Bible teaches is that God created organisms with big pools of information and called these kinds. And from these kinds, we have all the diversity we see today in the organisms we observe that are present on the earth. This truth is supported by the science that we've been learning about in our study of genetics. It shows the absolute plausibility of all animal kinds fitting on the ark, just as God tells us it happened. But remember this, we do have a God who does the impossible and has been doing the impossible ever since the creation itself. So we won't be able to explain everything our great God does. But I'm thankful for that truth, because if I could explain God, then he would be as simple as I am. He would not be very smart, because I'm not very smart. I don't know everything. And if I do not know everything, then I wouldn't want to be able to figure out God completely, or he would not know everything. I want to serve a God that is smarter than me and smarter than any other human being. I want to serve a God who is more powerful than me and more powerful than any other human being. So I'm not ashamed because I believe in a God who does miracles. It is this belief that is the foundation of my faith and what I stake all my hope on. Those who don't believe in God believe that everything just popped into existence by itself. And that belief is a belief that is still based on impossibilities, but they can't call them miracles. They call them accidents or random chance. They too must have faith in their belief, but there is no hope in their belief. No hope at all. So I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from the first to the last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith.